Welcome to the Business Titans podcast. Today on Business Titans, we are joined by Mark Drasutis, who is an established business leader and digital expert with over 25 years of media and digital product experience. Recently, Mark was the Chief Digital Officer at a leading ASX top 20 company where he led Catalyst for Change. He has been focused on defining and delivering digital leadership, innovative and creative user-centric solutions within market-leading global digital businesses. Delighting all customers of digital products is a passion Mark brings to his team and organizations. This passion and focus aligned with strong leadership, disruptive thinking and action defines Mark as a true industry titan. How are you going today, Mark?
I'm good, Oscar. Thank you for those kind words. It's all good. It's great to be here with you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Look, thanks for your time today. We want to get straight into the meat of this. I want to understand, Mark, what was it from your perspective where you decided that innovation was what you were going to focus on, the key discipline that you wanted to incorporate into your life, and why are you so passionate about innovation?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's one of those where it's kind of also, that word is kind of interesting because it means different things in different shapes and forms. I'll get to that in a minute. And one of the reasons why I kind of gravitated towards this space. My background was, I've got my kind of career in 3 chapters. You went through some of it there, but I kind of started with media to digital media. Then I went to digital natives like AOL back in the day, which was doing a lot of things that are now scaled and driving a lot of the Facebooks and Googles and Alibabas and Tencents of the world. Back in the day, though, when there was no connectivity and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse was, there was no bandwidth, there was no mobile phone. No one kind of thought they could use it and no one trusted it. And I think then my current chapter is taking that digital native thinking into traditional businesses, and Yahoo was the catalyst for that kind of innovation space. Was actually, how can we start releasing potential of businesses and data and technologies to really make a difference in people's lives? And that's kind of where I landed at News Corp in an innovation role, and actually was looking at the space of innovation, saying, okay, what does it mean in this business? So you can talk about the Google 10X guys and, moonshots and go to Mars and cars that drive themselves and VR and AR, but actually every business needs to think about, and every entrepreneur needs to think about, what does innovation mean for them? What's the definition and how does it work for them? Because I have this simple view of, if you take a 7-step process and you make it 3 steps, you're actually innovation, because you're innovating. It's most sustaining innovation. It's not kind of disruptive innovation, but it's innovation in the space. And it kind of drove a channel for a lot of the background that I brought, a mix of technology, a mix of focus on jobs to be done, a mix of product, a mix of understanding experiences, and a mix of scale. It's just that kind of interesting piece of like actually getting an innovation and actually doing the exploration, the discovery. It's really stimulating, really creative. Then there's the other side of it, which is the people that optimize and manage businesses as they are today. And it's the scalar piece in the middle that really interests me. And that's the thing that drives my passion, is releasing the potential of all the assets, the people, the products, the platforms, the data of a business to basically, and we have a purpose at IG, which is where I make your world a safer place. I love to align to those type of purposes. So that's kind of what drives me. It's about that releasing potential. And defining and helping people to define actually what innovation means for them. It's kind of
yeah. Well, it really goes back part and parcel. What you mentioned touches on the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, because a growth mindset shows you that whatever capacity that we have today does not mean that that's the capacity we have tomorrow, and you go through this process of unleashing your potential. So what process should a business go through when they're thinking about, well, how do I reconcile the difference between where I am today and the potential that I want to achieve?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's kind of daunting for people. They kind of like it looks at this view where you go, okay, everyone's sitting here now in the COVID world and thinking, well, I want to get a little bit back to normal. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. Like, you cannot have this conversation where I was talking to someone this morning about habits, and it takes around 66 days to change a habit. Minimum is 21 days. Now, if you think about where people have been working from home and they've been doing different things and they've been using e-commerce instead of actually going to a shop, and they've in Melbourne, we were talking about Melbourne before, but they've been in this process of more than 66 days. That means all their habits are now changed for kind of ever. And that means that there's a different conversation to have, and customer expectations are now going to drive businesses. So it's quite scary. I think about now, next, and future. And future is, I can see, and there's on the road to Paris today from Citroën, like cars that are basically electric vehicles you can just borrow and mobility as a service. Like, you can kind of see that, where you can see cars that drive themselves. You can see kind of how you can make the climate better by actually using renewables. You can kind of see that future, and you know where you are now. And the kind of path you need to take actually is through next. And everyone forgets about next. And I think one of the pieces that I help businesses and teams and inspiring teams is that you need to drive this change. And a little story that resonates in Australia is Sydney Harbour Bridge. So let's take Sydney Harbour Bridge as a good example. So Sydney Harbour Bridge, you used to drive over Sydney Harbour Bridge only 10 years ago. Did you actually stop, throw your coins into a bucket, and then drive across the bridge? That's 10 years ago. Yeah. Now, no one would imagine that actually, like, you'd now move to that, and as you go through Sydney Harbour Bridge, you drive across it, and it goes beep. And that little beep has behind it, if you unpack it and spiral out, has behind it businesses like Blue Dot. It has geospatial technologies. It has tracking of cars. It tracks their relationship to each other. It tracks all the data around actually all the customers. It automatically takes the payment. All of those things are an incremental step that's been made from the flicking the coin into the bucket to just driving across the bridge. Now, businesses need to think about where they sit on that scale. And a lot of businesses still think analog. We're talking again this morning about like moving a paper process to be a digital process is like, no, digital businesses don't talk about digital. They actually just make a process that works the most effective way of their resources, assets, and people, and technologies. So if you think about the analog to digital step, the digital step has to be let's review our processes end to end. Let's understand the pain points of all our customers. Let's understand where we can make effectiveness, not efficiency. And then once you've done that step, you have a chance of being cognitive. So actually now going across Sydney Harbour Bridge is a cognitive experience. How you don't even think about it. But there's none of this rooting around and say, oh God, I've only got 10 cents, I'm gonna have a go. But the customer service is so much better than it was before. Yeah. So those kind of stories, when you think about it, they put it in people's real life. You go, that's innovation. That's only 10 years. So what would that be in my business or my area or my kind of industry? We talk about mining a lot in this country, but there's only like 10 people that run a mine. There's a reason for that, because actually once you've dug the mine, it's actually just automated. And there's 10 people sitting in Perth somewhere managing all these trucks that are driving around these mines and all these trains that are driving all the stuff and delivering all kinds of ships that are basically going around the world. Now, when I was back at EMAP, way back in the day, we built something called Global Liner Shipping Network that used very rudimentary technology, but in kind of 99, 2000, that tracked liner ships around the world. So you could do it then. Imagine what it is now. Yeah. So fundamentally, we've got to think differently about that next step. And the next step for the Sydney Harbour Bridge was, let's just automate this to a way that means that we can then get more data, more signals to make it more effective. And people have to make that next step. The future will come, but hey, Oscar, you couldn't tell me the future of what's going on in our world now, or we wouldn't be thought about it where we are today, talking through a bit of glass, talking to each other on a podcast. It's not a future we would have guessed for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a great deal of imagination and creativity when it comes to innovation, right? It's about imagining how things could be better. So I come across a lot of executives in my walks, Mark, who tell me that they don't have creativity. They don't have that as something that they think they're good at. Whereas I think creativity is an inherently human concept. We are all creative. So how do we start to unlock this level of creativity? Because what you've essentially condensed is, turning that or really understanding what that beep represents and backtracking and looking at all the various components of technology that go into creating that beep. But you have to think with the end in mind and think to yourself, well, how do we do this in a frictionless way that doesn't mean that people are stopping on the bridge, better experience, doesn't mean that people are scraping around for $1, better experience, and you get to where you're going faster, right? Better experience. So how should executives be thinking to unlock their creativity?
I think it's a good question. And it's like, we can look at other pieces on the bridge is a great analogy because it's like Transurban now runs out the back of it. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. and it's now one of the most effective businesses out there. And it's basically we're selling things to the other side of the world as well. There's a whole new business model there. It's like mobility as a service business model, which is really smart. I think it's about curiosity. I think,
Great.
and it's about also realizing that you are human. Yes, it's creativity is a human trait. There's like we can talk about. I talk to the Ambiata team a lot. Steve and the guys there, and you know, it's and Tiberia on the ethics side. And you go, there's always going to be a human somewhere involved in somewhere because the creativity piece isn't there. You know, machines can learn, machines can understand, and they can work around smart models for data, and they can learn as they go, but they're not going to be as creative. There's always that creativity required. I think it's about curiosity. I think executives are humans. They have a life. They have the same pain points and needs as others, like Nick Hawkins, the CFO or deputy CEO of IAG, he buys insurance. His wife has insurance. How does he buy his insurance? Well, I don't sit next to him and he's going to go and buy insurance. And he's going to go, well, this is a pain. I'm phoning up. So why do I need to phone someone? So it's like put yourself in the shoes of your customer. As an exec, we did this at News Corp, which was around diarying. I was sending Paul Whitaker and the teams and all the guys home to basically diary over the weekend, like look at their kids, look at their wife, look at where they use their mobiles, how often were they on there. And one of the conversations I do remember was like, we don't really get social at the moment. It was a long time ago. It was like 10 years ago or whatever, 9 years ago. But all the employees did. They just didn't see it as part of their job. They didn't think that being on Facebook and Twitter was their job. It was like something they did outside their job, and it became part of their job. And actually, that's the most, we're talking now about Google and Facebook and media companies, but we won't go there. But it's like, they need to be curious, and they need to put them in their shoes and go, okay, actually, the world I'm in is the world that our customers are in. Therefore, I need to put myself into the boardroom a bit. I need to put myself into the C-suite a bit and bring my experiences to the table, because my experiences and the experiences of customers are the same, because you are a customer. I think that curiosity and that creativity will then go, okay, hang on, that's interesting. Actually, would it be easier, to your point, would it be easier to go across the bridge if I just was able to drive across it? Okay, good, that's good. Now you can then empower a team with that outcome and set them off to go and work out how to do it. Now, I'm not saying that every leader needs to understand all the technologies, because they don't. They need to be able to empower teams and create a culture that allows them to be experimenting, working backwards, which is the Amazon model. We used it at IG, we used it at News Corp, which was like, think about what it is in the press release right at the end, and then, as I did with the beep, work backwards from it and go, okay, so what do we need? Well, we need to understand where people are driving, who's going across the bridge. How do we do that? Well, let's spot them via GPS. That's easy. I've got one of those on my phone. But the exec uses this device when they go for their kids to Nippers to use the map to find where they're going and west of the city they're going to go to deliver the kids to the Nippers. Okay, think about that. That's more interesting, because that means they understand GPS. They're just not putting it into their exec suite or the C-suite or their decision making or how their customers go. So I think that's one of the ways of doing creativity. But it's as you said, I agree, Oscar. It's a human trait. It's like everyone has it. Everyone brings it to the table. It's just how do you thrive and unleash it and release the potential of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We said this phrase at Yahoo, which was around understanding the art of the possible. How do you understand the art of the possible? And art is used deliberately because there's a lot of art and science, and the combination equals what people expect from businesses today. Like there's a lot of art and science around Airbnb, because like there's a lot of art around choosing locations and how the pictures work or whatever else. There's a lot of science around that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And would you say that digital and innovation and the realm that you play in is a lot to do with human psychology as well?
Gotcha. 100%. 100%. And it's understanding humans and humans' behaviors. You know, there's the books, the Bibles that sit behind product management. So there's Near's book on Hooked. So Near's book on Hooked was Trigger Action Reward. And then there's kind of Marty's book, Inspired. And all of those are around human behavior, psychology, understanding human behavior. We did a piece of work at AOL long time ago. I'm making myself feel old now, which was based off AOL groups and message boards, which obviously were the thing that powered a lot of back end of AOL back in the day, when Facebook was just starting. And we had on the team, we had basically a psychologist, a behavioral scientist back in the day. And her view was that they will have a problem with groups, because actually it gets to this view where you have this echo chamber and you start talking amongst yourselves and you start creating this dynamic where you only ever hear the same views as everyone else. And we used to have that problem in our message boards, 2000. It's not a new problem, but it's all about human behavior. I agree. It's about psychology. It's about understanding customer need to the level of meaning, and then what's meaningful to these customers. And then if you can put yourself in their shoes, then you'll have a chance. But you need to then be in a world of using insight, the understanding of those customers, the signals they're giving you, to therefore experiment and iterate by default your products forward and the experience forward and your new technologies forward. I think some businesses, traditional businesses that I work with and talk to, they've sat on a lot of their technology for a while and they haven't thought about, you need to iterate it. It's like, we'll write off this asset over a 10-year period. That means we won't touch it for 10 years. But actually all the customer expectations are changing around it, and that technology no longer works. You can't use it because it's not fit for purpose in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that I love about digital as well. It really is staying close to the customer and understanding them. If you look at things like Facebook just did a major desktop refurbish, let's call it. And all people can do is like, a lot of people are complaining about it. And I think that one of the reasons is, and maybe you can elaborate on this, but I feel that if you've got a product out there and you help people to develop certain habits, right? And then you change the habits that people need to interact with your technology, it causes friction, because as human beings, we don't want to think. We just want the habits to take over, because most of our life is made of habit. Is that, like, are people missing that critical step in developing products, or why does this happen?
Well, I think they're missing a critical step on, it's all about habits. And it's like that's why it's very interesting, this period of time where people have been doing something differently than they normally do for a long period of time. Those habits will have dropped. You know, if you ever tried to stop drinking, stop smoking, whatever else, it's hard. But once you do it, you never go back to it. And it's like saying you then, one of the best signals is the bins outside on your road. If all your neighbors haven't put the bin out, you do not know what bin night it is. Until one of your neighbors puts the bins out, and then you know, it's red light, it's green light, it's blue light, whatever. Now, that's about habits. It's about signals and habits playing together. And I think you're right. People underestimate these habits are there. And if you redo interfaces, like we did a lot of work on Yahoo Mail, we had like 25 to 27 different versions of Yahoo Mail running at any time in any different beta alpha group. But once you've changed the way that you actually attach a document to an email, the habit, well, hold on, it was there before, where's it gone? It's like that type of understanding, people kind of sometimes forget that those types of habits are there. So we just introduced our IG story, which is, you know, during COVID, we actually had most of the core staff working from home on a shift system, because we trusted them and we empowered them to make the right decisions. And basically the technology system has been improved through the kind of customer technology team, which is really good, using Verint to work from home. But they've added to that now, which is FaceTime, and the ability to have FaceTime. So because the habit is, when you have an accident or you've got a claim, a complex claim, you want to talk to someone. You can't really, you can digitize the whole experience around it, but actually there needs to be a physical interaction. I think people sometimes forget, you're right, about like, these are habits, and you're kind of changing people's habits as you go through. And I think customers are ahead of lots of businesses when you actually ask them, what's the actual pain here? It's the great analogy of like, I'm looking for a drill. No, you're not. You're looking for a hole in the wall. Okay, how do I get a better hole in the wall? That's a better conversation. I quite like what Noble are doing right now. Bud and the guys, they're using the democratic, like, 3-liner, build back better. And how do you build back better your business is quite an interesting challenge for people right now. And it's about these habits have changed. Like, we're sitting here through glass and we're not going to be in a room all the time, or we're not wanting to do that. Digital technologies allow you to unleash your potential a lot more than people realize.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's say you've got, a good idea for your business, and you've got,
Hmm.
you figure out a way, let's say, to unleash that potential.
Yeah.
What are some of the tricks in your arsenal to be able to convince the board that that's the right idea to pursue, and get subsequent funding for that idea, and go through that whole painful process of convincing people that we can create the future?
I think there's a whole developer mindset. To your point on growth mindset, there's a whole developer mindset that also is added to that.
Okay.
So if we look at the largest organizations we're talking about FANG here, they're all actually founded or run now by engineers or product managers. Like Bezos, Cook, Sergey, they're all actually engineers or developers or product managers or digital product managers of origin. And I think for an entrepreneur, some of the tricks are that you really need to, and for execs, and to basically sell your business in, is a little phrase on a picture's worth 1,000 words, but a prototype's worth 1,000 meetings. And a prototype, getting as quick as possible to code, using no code or whatever else, and actually allowing you to actually then test and learn, test and learn, test and learn, test and learn. And that's what we mean by test and learn. What we mean by fail fast is literally I've built something in the morning, I've tested it with 5 people in the afternoon, it doesn't work because it doesn't change their habits, or they can't understand how it works, so just rip it down, start again. You have to have that mindset. And the same thing then applies, as we talked about the beep on the bridge. You then spiral that back down into everything in your business as an entrepreneur. So you need to, and your thinking needs to be, my business model is always up for question. My product experience is always up for question. My monetization model is always up for question. My partnerships are always up for question. If we ask Stuart Butterfield whether he was in charge of Slack when he was back in the day working with us in Yahoo, he was doing Flickr. No, we know that's a great story. That's the one to think about, which is he started a computer game. He built a photo sharing site. He started another computer game. He ended up with Slack. It's like, well, and you got this incremental fluidity and adaptability. So getting as quickly as possible to code and getting it in front of customers. And News Corp, we used to use the tunnel at Sydney Central Station to go and just paper prototype, understand Ashmore Isles. There's putting that thinking into practicality will teach you so much. And you'll realize that, is this a goer, is it not a goer? And then for execs, how you pitch to execs, there's the prototype, there's the actual physical, this is what we know it's going to do, these are the jobs it's going to do. It's think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and where does it sit or how does it satisfy those? And then understand risk. Because all execs care about is actually, am I minimizing the risk? Am I maximizing my outcome? So think about where you will actually diminish the risk of the business to counter disruption, or to make its employee experience better, or to make its customer experience better, and put it in that type of wording, which is how am I actually enabling and emboldening the business or the exec or the business to actually be taking less risk than they thought. To your point, lots of businesses are now using a lot of technologies that are de-risking the creativity of their people, things like Miro, things like Splunk, things like Jira, Confluence, Slack, etc., Zoom, etc., Teams, whatever. Those technologies are minimizing the risk of the business. So where do you, as an entrepreneur, fit in that profile?
Yeah, and is it a case of having a center of excellence and a team, like the A team, for instance, A team digital innovation team that are out there trying different things, trying to innovate, and if so, how much of a company's agenda should be around innovation and change?
Well, there's a little bit of a number on the innovation piece, which is 60% of your CEO's time should be thinking about the future.
Great.
So if that's happening, then that's good. If that's not happening, then you've got a problem, because you may over time not be thinking about with the right mindset, as you said, about growth and abundance mindsets. I think the small teams, it depends on your operating model and it depends on your culture. Culture is a bit of a read-only thing. So if you're trying to basically change the culture, work within a traditional business, you need to understand the cultural norms of that business and what actual innovation could mean to that business. So if you're trying to think about like running a lab within an organization that can be troublesome, because it means everyone else then goes, well, they've got innovation then, so I'll just do the same as I do every day. Well, actually, they may have the insight and the understanding that you need from your customers and from their experiences that might be the missing link in the piece that you should be driving for innovation. I think it's inclusivity and empowerment is key to that. So I think it depends on what fits. I know it's kind of like a flick back, like there isn't an answer for every organization. It's what fits in every organization. Like a venture fund works, an innovation lab works for some organizations, or actually making innovation everyone's job and freeing them up and enabling, using hackathons and various things, enabling them to actually open up their eyes to the art of the possible could work in some organizations. So when we were News, we ran the Foundry, and the sales teams, the marketing teams, the technology teams, and the editors could work together on a problem. But when you unleash them like that, they were innovating. Everyone saw that innovation was something that they could do, and they've moved it on with the slingshot work, and they were able to actually innovate around what actually meant for News, which was around content. It wasn't around anything else. It was more around content.
Yeah.
So it's what fits. There isn't a golden bullet for it.
Yeah, and I love that answer in terms of making innovation part of everyone's agenda, because I truly believe, I mean, I work with a lot of CEOs, and part of my mantra and methodology is to make leaders know that one of their responsibilities is to unleash the potential of their teams.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
It is to literally work with people to unleash their potential, and whether that potential is within the organization or outside of the organization, that's irrelevant. I think it's our job as leaders to really help people unleash their creativity, help them bring ideas to the table, because then we get a much better, healthier organization that people love working for. Do you agree with that sentiment, Mark?
I agree with that. And it has to be aligned. There has to be alignment as well, because then you're thinking about, like, when you think about organizational structures, the organizations are organisms. They're like a bit of an ecosystem. So some are big, some are small. If you're a startup, you're like 2 people. Maybe if you're an IG, you're thousands of people, and maybe if you're Qantas, you're different size again. But like, actually, I think when you look at it, you're right. It's about really unleashing potential. It's about the business itself is a bunch of people who are gathered around an outcome and have some capital to go and grow that capital. Basic formish, and not really worked that one through, but that's kind of what we're looking at. So unleashing your people and unleashing your assets and your technologies and your data and activating that in a way that means you can think you have a path to the future, or you set yourself to be future ready. That's all that CEOs and CEOs you need to think about. But the alignment is important, and you can't underestimate the alignment and commitment to make sure that everyone in the organization is aligned behind the same outcomes. And that's the thing that breaks innovation and breaks these innovation models and breaks actually where we're going and stops momentum on things, is a lack of alignment. If we're thinking about, like, I'm on now and you're thinking about next, if the guy on now doesn't share a next outcome or KPI or goal or incentive, then they're just going to care about now, because they're incentivized to care about now. Whereas actually, if they're, to the point, 60% of the CEO's time based on the future or next and future, like, that's the important outcome, is the alignment. So you can't have everyone just focused on where we are now and gold on everyone where we are now. It gets back to these incentive schemes, actually, to be honest. It's like, if you're not incentivized to think about next and future, then you won't. Like, if you're not incentivized to do something, you're not going to ever change your habit, because there's no reason for you to do it, because you've got all the things you need in Maslow's hierarchy of needs: food, shelter, comfort, money, friendships, growth, all the things you've got. You need to think about incentive alignment. It was balanced scorecards were created a long time ago, but they're quite important. And innovation needs to sit in there, and the customer needs to sit in there. If it doesn't, you maybe are going to be in a different place than someone in who maybe not even a competitor of yours by now, but will become a competitor because they are thinking about your customers in a different way.
Yeah.
Insurance is a great one. Like, you know, where's insurance now? Well, I'm just at AGL. AGL are now doing hire a car or car membership with insurance. That's an energy company in the insurance space. Interesting. What do we do here?
Absolutely. That's a great one. And so how do we actually align organizations? Is it purely through incentives, and what type of incentives do you mean?
I mean outcomes. I think it's about outcomes. So it's agreed outcomes. So it's agreed outcomes for the business. Like, and this is where purpose plays very well. If you're a purpose-driven organization, you're a learning organization, then you're very clearly going to get a set of outcomes that are aligned to your purpose. And you can use that as a litmus test of whether you should go left or right, or make this decision, or red or green, or whatever. And I think when I say incentives, I mean, when you look at, we were talking this morning about the future of work at the CSIRO symposium, and it's around the origin of the office is medieval monks. They used to have an office they worked in, and they did all the scripture, and then they lived in the monastery, and then they lived the rest of their life in the rest of the monastery. That was kind of their office. That makes sense. Now, if you think about incentives, then, and we're basing it on that model of a way of working that's a very matrix, hierarchical, P&L led organization, then you're going to have the wrong incentives, because you're not going to really think about, like, actually, what's the next demographic of customers? Actually, how do we service our customers in a different way when they're actually having a pain point? And like, actually, what's the best way of us actually solving this problem? It could be through something really simple or something really complex. I don't know. But like, unless you're incentivized consistently, and the whole C-suite and then the organization is aligned behind a series of outcomes that are, like, you look at Salesforce. Salesforce is very good, very purpose-driven organization. And everyone can see Parker's and Mark's goals, and they trickle down the whole organization. So literally, they're all aligned behind the same outcomes. That's quite powerful when you think about it, because that then allows you to basically pull a force of people behind something. There's a great article from the team at Noble called The Evolutionary Edge, and it's around how you can basically have an organism. It's like an organism, and it references nature, and it references I always get the name wrong, murmuration of starlings, how they gather together to counter a hawk. And when you think about that, you see it in the sky, you see parrots all moving together, birds all moving together, shoals of fish all moving together. They're doing it deliberately to counter disruption. The disruption is the person's going to eat them. Different conversation. But literally, like, they come together in a fluidity. But because they're all aligned on the outcome, which is staying alive and feeding and breeding and being what they are, organizations need to think about that for incentives. I think it's a different, interesting spin on it, but it's just how I think about it sometimes.
Yeah, and I love the way you think about it, because the truth is, digital permeates throughout the entire organization. It's part of who we are, and innovation is part of who we are. And you've beautifully painted the way to unleash that potential, right? It's not just a way of thinking, it's also a way of alignment through incentives and making sure people are working towards that common goal and having a purpose-driven organization. I come across so many organizations that are not purpose-driven, they're more product-driven, but products in terms of what can our products do and how can we add new things to our products, rather than thinking, what do the customers actually want? What are the pain points that the customers are facing that we can solve for them? And it kind of baffles me sometimes that there are a lot of companies that don't have that digital thinking as part of their board and permeating through their entire organization. Because if you get that right, I mean, you have like the things that you said, you have a group of people that have some capital that are trying to grow that capital, right? That's essentially what a business is. And if you structure it in the right way, have the right innovation agenda, have the right digital people on board, then you're just maximizing that investment because your customers are going to love the business. That's just the reality of it.
Precisely. And I think that's where the ecosystems start playing, is what I'm reading about at the moment. Is like, you start reading about these ecosystem plays and you start saying, well, actually, it doesn't have to be just me that's doing this, because there'll be multiple players with multiple parts of a customer's life cycle or customer's life that can work together with these other things. So Apple have just done Apple One. announced yesterday, it's like a bundle, unbundle, but the bundle gets you to a point where they understand fitness. So they're going to give you a better service on all of those things. It's all going to lift. But there's nothing to stop organizations working together on that level because you trust them for certain things. So Life 360, working with healthcare, working with insurance, working with transport, that's the ecosystem play. And the benefits of the partners where actually you've got like customers drive value and all the partners get value. That's going to lift everything. I think you're 100% on, Scott. I think it's like there's a little phrase I use when I talk to colleagues and various others, which is like, if you ask me in my old digital native world, like talking to friends who work at Facebook and Google and Atlassian and Slack and various other organizations, they don't mention the word digital at all. Because actually their mindset is they're already there. Now, lots of all businesses think they are, but they're not. And like you need to over engineer it a little bit and say, actually, we want to be a cognitive business. We need to be a digital first business. Every business that reaches digital tipping point, which is like 50% of your interactions with your customer are now via a channel that's not an analog one, either face-to-face or telephone or retail or walk-in retail. If you're 50%, then 50% of your customers are more likely to want to deal with you via a experience that is like an app or a cognitive experience or an Alexa or a Google Home or a website or an IoT device or whatever. They're more likely. So that means 50% of your customers, which is 50% of your business, is now coming down a different pan channel. Are you actually got the mindset to be that business? That's the question. It's a good one. You outline there as unleashing potential, and I think it's good. It's
awesome.
Different mindset. It's about mindset and skill set, capabilities. You're right. You need to gather the right capabilities, have the right type of people pointing in the right direction, working together on the same outcomes.
Yeah. And finally, Mark, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
That's a good question. There's a question I always got asked of, like, moving from news to IAG was always an interesting thing, from media to insurance. And people ask me why I did that. And one of the answers, one of the primary answer is it's about data. And it's about data. It's about first party data. It's actually how you can actually unleash and activate data at a scaled way. And I think there's definitely a little bit of we've got our data, that's great, mindset, but actually that's not deriving value from that data. So unless you've worked out some way of activating that data to therefore exponentially grow your business or grow your customer advocacy or grow your customer satisfaction or understand better your customers to therefore service them better in different ways, I think we need to think carefully. I think one thing that I think carefully about is, like, you need to thread these together. So the digital side of your business needs to work with the data side of the business, needs to work with your marketing side of your business, your technology side. It's actually an ecosystem, or it's actually like as I said, it's like an organism. It's like a hive that needs to work together towards a single outcome. Lots of businesses, I think, do separate out the data piece from the execution piece and the activation piece and the marketing, and then that creates this kind of different mindset. And I think the final thing is everyone needs to become a developer in their mindset at some shape or form. And I've got a kind of like A16Z did a really good piece, David Ulrich from there, around the 4 paradigms of a developer. Like, they collaborate at scale and they have a revision control system.
Yeah.
They work faster with a command line. So basically they talk about things in a very short way. They use log files for performance improvement. And they also, critically, and this is the key piece on habits, they don't repeat themselves. They basically codify something and then they don't repeat it. They go do something else different. I think that's an interesting mindset. And, my one piece of advice to everyone is go learn to code something, because once you've got some of that mindset in your head as an exec and as a board member or whatever, then you'll start realizing that actually the power of your business is your developers. And as I said, digital businesses don't talk about digital, but they are a lot of developers and product managers running those businesses. And that's the difference. It's not people who go to meetings, it's people who cut code. that drives these things.
Yeah, I love that. Not people that go to meetings. That's typically, sometimes we can get ourselves worked up in that, right? Just doing meetings over and over again, doing
100%.
repetitive tasks. Whereas, I come from a field of discipline that's like, do it once, create the process, and then outsource that, right? That's the way to grow yourself and unleash your own potential as an executive or as an individual.
Yes, that's the developer mindset. And you need to think that that's the growth mindset, the developer mindset, and the kind of digital mindset. Because digital is a mindset, it's not a thing. You couldn't put your finger on what digital is. It's actually a mindset. So I would say that's. You didn't ask me that question, but I'm giving you a little bit of a view there. That's Mark's view of the world.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, everyone, you have it here at Business Titans Podcast. If you have any other questions for Mark or I, please let us know in the comments, and be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Give us 1 sec, Mark.
Pleasure.